In the dim light of American highways and forgotten motel rooms, a monster lurked behind the wheel of a truck, a man whose very name would come to haunt headlines and send shivers down the spines of those who remembered. Keith Hunter Jesperson, later infamously known as the Happy Face Killer, carved a path of terror during the early 1990s, leaving behind a trail of unspeakable acts and mystery that still resonates in the archives of true crime. His story is not merely one of cold-blooded murder. It is a haunting portrait of a troubled soul shaped by harsh treatment, isolation, and an unyielding desire for control. Born on a cool April day in 1955 in Chilliwack, British Columbia, Keith was thrust into a world where love was tainted by violence. As the middle child in a family of 5, he quickly learned that being different meant standing out for all the wrong reasons. Teased relentlessly for his imposing stature and ostracized by his peers, young Keith did not seek friendship among other children or in the company of ordinary pets. Instead, he fixated on the small, vulnerable animals he encountered outdoors, not to befriend them, but to assert control by inflicting pain and harm. Later in life, he recalled these early acts with a disturbing sense of pleasure, a grim foreshadowing of the brutality he would later unleash. The battleground of his childhood was marked by the heavy hand of an alcoholic father, whose violent tendencies cast a long shadow over the family. In the heat of domestic strife, Keith was physically punished and humiliated in front of others, deepening his sense of isolation and fanning an inner anger, a spark that would eventually ignite into a series of heinous acts. Even as a child, his cruelty knew no bounds. While others played innocently in their trailer park, Keith targeted stray animals with chilling efficiency. Birds, cats, and other defenseless creatures met their untimely end at his hands, beaten, tormented, and strangled with a practiced precision. These early acts were not mere mischief, they were precursors to the more sinister deeds he would later commit. In his twisted mind, the suffering of another became a currency, a way to reclaim the control that had been forever denied him. After puberty, Keith grew into an imposing figure, eventually reaching a height of 6 feet 8 inches. Relocating to Cellar, Washington, with his family, he continued to struggle with isolation, a giant among his peers, both physically and emotionally. Nicknames like Igor, or simply Ig, given by his own brothers, only deepened his feeling of being an outsider. In those quiet, sleepless hours, as echoes of his father's harsh discipline haunted him, he began to fantasize about taking lives in ways that defied decency. By his early 20s, Keith was working as a truck driver, a job that allowed him to traverse the country and provided the perfect cover for his dark impulses. In 1975, he married Rose Hucker. Although he continued his career on the open road, the marriage eventually crumbled under the weight of infidelity and suspicion, and they divorced in 1990. The road, with its endless miles and fleeting encounters, became the stage for a series of crimes that would soon shock the nation. It all began in a seedy bar near Portland, Oregon, on a cold January night in 1990. Towner Bennett, a woman seeking companionship, was drawn into the orbit of a man whose outward charm masked a deep-seated depravity. A casual invitation to a rented house quickly escalated into a violent struggle. In a fit of uncontrollable anger, Keith overpowered Bennett and strangled her with his bare hands. Her life was extinguished without ceremony, marking the beginning of his killing spree. As media attention swirled around the unsolved murder of Towner Bennett, Laverne Pavlinak saw an opportunity to escape her long-term troubled relationship with her live-in boyfriend, John Sosnovsky. Having read every detail reported about Bennett's death, she arranged a meeting with investigators and offered a completely fabricated confession. In her account, she claimed that Sosnovsky had coerced her into assisting with the heinous crime, a narrative that included a serious sexual violation, the killing, and the disposal of Bennett's body, all details pieced together entirely from newspaper reports. On March 5, 1990, Both Pavlinak and Sosnovsky were arrested, and on February 8, 1991, they were convicted of Bennett's murder. To avoid the death penalty, Sosnovsky pleaded no contest and received a life sentence, while Pavlinak was sentenced to at least 10 years, far harsher than she had anticipated. Although she later admitted that her entire story was fabricated, her claims were initially accepted. It wasn't until January 7, 1996, when Keith Jesperson and his attorney provided a confession with convincing evidence, including details like the location of the victim's purse, which had not been found at the crime scene, that the true narrative began to emerge. Frustrated by the misplaced focus of the media, Keith devised a chilling method to force recognition. He began leaving his confessions in unexpected places, scrawling them on bathroom walls at truck stops, and sending anonymous letters to newspapers and law enforcement. Each note was signed with a simple smiley face, a grotesque signature that transformed a symbol of joy into a mark of terror. This stark contrast captivated the public and solidified his notoriety, even as his actions remained shrouded in darkness. As the years passed, Keith's killing pattern grew increasingly heartless. His victims were chosen almost at random, but often included women on the fringes of society, sex workers, and transients who might otherwise have been overlooked. On August 30, 1992, near Blythe, California, the body of an unidentified woman was found, a victim of brutal assault and strangulation, later referred to as Claudia. A month later, in Turlock, California, Cynthia Lynn Rose, a sex worker briefly caught in his predatory orbit at a truck stop, was discovered dead. November 1992 brought another grim chapter from Salem, Oregon. Lorianne Pentland, whose life ended over a dispute regarding her fee, became yet another name in his growing list of victims. With each case, the scope of his crimes widened, stretching from the misty coasts of Oregon to the sun-baked highways of California, and even reaching distant states like Florida, Nebraska, and Wyoming. In June 1993, his brutal routine was momentarily disrupted in Santanella, California, when a previously unidentified woman was found dead. Although her death was initially dismissed as a drug overdose, the unmistakable signs of methodical strangulation soon revealed the grim truth. Facial reconstruction played a crucial role, and in 2022, she was finally identified as 45-year-old Patricia Skipple. Then, in September 1994 in Crestview, Florida, another Jane Doe surfaced, later formally identified as Suzanne L. Kellenberg. The relentless march of Keith's killing spree finally turned on March 30th, 1995, with the murder of Julie Winningham. This case, defined by its unflinching cruelty, forced him into a corner. After a police interrogation and sensing the inevitability of capture, he attempted to take his own life twice, desperate acts born of a mind overwhelmed by its own darkness. In a final bid for either mercy or notoriety, he turned himself in. While in custody, he began detailing the dark narrative of his crimes, a confession that compelled law enforcement to re-examine cold cases across several states. Beneath the grim tally of his confirmed 8 victims lay a staggering claim. Keith would later assert that he had taken as many as 160 lives. Although only 8 murders have been incontrovertibly linked to him, the very idea of a serial killer operating on such a vast scale sent shivers down investigators' spines. His ability to vanish into the fabric of everyday life, a truck driver by day and a remorseless predator by night, underscored a chilling truth. Unchecked evil can infiltrate even the most ordinary corners of society. Even as the case against him solidified in courtrooms and behind prison bars, the legacy of the happy face killer grew. The signature smiley face, once a simple symbol of joy, had been repurposed into an indelible mark of terror. This paradox, this grotesque union of innocence and horror, captivated journalists and the public alike. His need for attention was as unmistakable as it was chilling, a twisted cry for recognition born of deep isolation. The true impact of Keith Jesperson's crimes is not only recorded in police files or media reports, it is etched in the hearts of those left behind. Among them is his daughter, Melissa G. Moore, whose life has been overshadowed by the legacy of her father. In interviews on national television, from Dr. Phil to ABC's 2020, Melissa recalled haunting memories of a childhood marred by inexplicable cruelty. She remembered her home next to a charming apple orchard, yet behind its calm beauty lay unspeakable horrors. It was there that she witnessed her father's acts against defenseless stray animals, a grim preview of the monstrous violence that would later define his public persona. The image of lifeless kittens hanging on a clothesline remains an irreversible scar, a testament to the depths of darkness that festered behind closed doors. Over the years, Melissa has worked to reclaim her own narrative from the dark stories surrounding her father. Through books, interviews, and media appearances, she has sought to piece together the life of a man irrevocably linked with terror, a task that also serves as a broader warning about the forces of isolation, harsh treatment, and unchecked rage. Even now, as he languishes behind bars at the Oregon State Penitentiary, serving multiple life sentences without hope of parole, the legacy of the happy face killer continues to cast a long, ominous shadow. His name is etched into the dark annals of criminal history, a chilling reminder of how a life steeped in torment and cruelty can erupt into unspeakable violence. For every victim confirmed, and every cold case reopened in the wake of his confession, a lingering question remains. How many lives might have been snuffed out by a man who saw himself as both judge and executioner in a world he deemed unworthy of redemption? Thus, as we retell this troubling saga, we remember not only the victims whose voices were silenced, but also the deeper truths about the roots of darkness and the urgent need to never let such shadows go unnoticed.